Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Next Stop Automation, the podcast where we talk to people from the logistics industry about wins, challenges, and the future of operations. Today with me is Daniel Kraus from Shippabo. They are a digital freight forwarder and run one of the leading platforms for supply chain management. Daniel, welcome.
It's great to be here. Thanks for your time, Konstantin.
My pleasure. So as I briefly introduced you, could you expand a little bit about who you guys are, what you do, and who your offer is especially relevant for?
Sure thing. So Shippabo is an NVOCC. So we are a digital freight forwarder, as you said, and we were founded back in 2013, really with an intention to focus on the mid part of the global freight market, which we've been done. So today our business is really in three parts. We do Shippabo, we say Shippabo Freight, which is largely we pretty much focus on Asia to North America as a key area. We handle customs, and we also, as you mentioned, have one of the leading platforms for supply chain management, which is a digital platform that allows our users to book, manage, order, track, and bring partners together around shipments and the shipments that they're actually doing.
Now, I could imagine that when there was freight forwarders, at some point someone had the idea to make it slightly digital. So use of digital tools and advancement in technology is something that got your company to be born, I guess. Is that right?
That's true, actually. So when Nina and Sam, the two founders, actually started Shippabo, I was in the spirit of really consolidating and bringing everything together into one workflow. One of the things that Nina had found in her own shipping work was that there was really no method of getting all of the parties involved in a shipment onto the same page, from the carriers to the packers to the shippers to the consignees and so on. So her vision was to really create a platform that allowed all of these folks to participate together, sort of in the same space, and then to also partake of the different ancillary services like messaging and tracking and billing and invoicing, all those different things. And so the growth of Shippabo across the past 12 or 13 years has really been us, building on that vision to deliver something that's become, as you said, fortunately, and one of the leading platforms really for supply chain management. We work as a company. We actually have offices around the world, so we actually do a lot of on-site work. That's a big part of any kind of freight forwarding, because a lot of the challenges you have do occur kind of remotely. It's very hard to do it, from the destination. And we've kind of grown both on the freight forwarding side and also on the digital side. Today we work and have a fair amount of expertise in a good number of different verticals, from electronics to furniture, to home, to building materials and things like that, where we address the specific needs of each one and understand deeply how that relates to both our own forwarding methods, but then also and shipment pricing and things like that, but also to the digital tools that are kind of required for each one and their expectations. And experience with those customers through the years has really helped us, build up the platform to what it is today, which is really this great consolidated and very visual environment for managing your supply chain.
You mentioned in the beginning that the idea is to bring all these different parties involved into one place. So what makes the difference here precisely about operations that are being run on a daily basis?
Yeah. So it's interesting. Very often, once shipping, especially a lot of our customers ship, on a regular basis. Often they'll ship the same things. Often it's even on the same line, depending upon where factories are located and things like that. So, it's a little bit like, in a way, driving to work, where you don't really, you know how to get there. You don't need a map to drive to work, but you do still use, an app like a Waze or a Google Maps or something, or what have you, or Here Maps, to see if there's traffic or not, because that's the thing that can, kind of get in your way. Similarly with shipping, if you're doing the same thing over and over and over, you expect normalcy, but when there isn't normalcy, it's a place where you have to react pretty quickly, right? And a lot of our imports are in the 40 to 50 day range. So there's a little bit of reaction time, but a lot of things can happen through that supply chain, right? Between the 50 odd pieces of paper that have to change hands, with weather concerns, with slowdowns, with strikes, with equipment availability, never mind something like COVID or something like that occurs. And so that's the kind of thing that requires sort of two different efforts. One of those is having a really good operations team who has alternates and options for you, and two, a software that allows you to really keep your finger on the pulse. But similarly, most of our customers benefit most from the platform when there is a problem. That's the place where they like to see that things are going well, but where they're really going to pay attention, of course, when there is a problem, when there is when there's a slowdown, when there's a strike or something like that. When there is some sort of an advisory, as we call it in the platform, generated that says, hey, there's going to be a problem here. One of the unique things about the platform is that we do take those things into consideration. We do provide notifications, we provide messaging, and all those other things, both in person and also digitally. And our system called 4C actually allows us to predict delivery time for each individual milestone of shipment and also for the ultimate delivery. So that's a critical measure for a lot of our customers because they use that as a business method to understand really what their timing is like. And in some industries, it really depends on the industry. It depends on the time of year. There's a lot of variables. But in some industry, that delivery date and the accuracy of that delivery date is absolutely critical to their business. In some cases, like if you're just restocking T-shirts into a warehouse, well, let's see, restocking white T-shirts into a warehouse, it's not as important. But if you're shipping against let's say items that have already been sold to customers, if you're shipping items that are required for a marketing launch or something of that nature, then the dates really are critical. And that's going to influence the choice of even potentially of carriers that you use, or the choice of strings or shipping lanes that you use based on reliability. So there's a lot that goes into the equation. And we like to bring all of those things together between our in-person services with our operations team and the platform that gives you the visibility.
Among those factors that you just mentioned, you help with the platform with disruptions, predictive analytics, all that stuff. What do you think is the main driver for your customers to come and work with you?
That's a good question. It it I think there's a couple of them. I think that the one of the most important is certainly reliability. And that's not so much that even the reliability of what I mean by that is reliability of response, which means they know that we're actually going to be there. We're not going to get so busy that, hey, they're only shipping 50 TEU a year with us. We're not going to pay attention. They know that we are always there, and that we've really built our relationship on that reliability. And that's one of the things that's really critical at the sort of at the mid level of the market where we work, where it's not just necessarily the bulk of our customers are not one or two a year, nor are they 10,000 TEU containers a year. I'm more sort of in the central part because that's the point where companies are still in growth mode. They're not yet working, let's say, directly with carriers because they're gargantuan, a big Home Depot or a Lowe's or something like that. But they do have a lot of dependencies because they do have some smaller shipments. They have some really critical shipments. And at the same time, the financial pressures are there to save money. So I think that reliability of response, and both in terms of the offerings that we provide, the quotes and the options that we provide there, reliable different options, and also reliability in face of emergency is one critical factor. I'd say the second one is really accuracy. And making certain that we're showing them is technically accurate and allows them to have the conversations that they need to have. One of the original elements of Nina's vision was having a platform, which I think we've really made good on, where everybody can talk to everybody about anything. So it doesn't take you 3 days of communications back and forth in order to get the shipper to get in a piece of info. Let's say the consignee to get a piece of information from the shipper or from the stuffer or for something, or even for the ops team if something goes wrong. So I think that technical accuracy is a really critical part of it, and that's a challenging thing because data in this industry is always a challenge. There's an awful lot of variables that go sort of from the carrier forward. My background is very much in SaaS and other areas, and software as a service and other verticals, and where accurate data is kind of a given. And it was one of the most remarkable things to me when I got into logistics and into oceanic shipping that I learned that, like, no, it's not a given here. There's a lot of work to do, and there's quite an art that Shippabo has developed through the years, and Sam, CTO, has really grown with the team around making certain that you are able to interpolate what all those numbers mean, because they may not be making a lot of sense when they come in the door. So that's a large part of what we do too. So I think those are probably the top two things: is reliability and technical accuracy. And then I think the third one is just availability. I mean, we have SLAs, times within which we get back to customers, and that kind of availability for emergencies. We've seen every emergency in the book, by the way, through the years. Everything from the storms and the theft and all the different things that sort of happen, and that's of course influenced as well. The products that we offer to customers, which range from obviously freight and customs, and but also things like insurance, as well as some interesting programs for customers who don't need big insurance necessarily, but they also want some insurance against delays and things like that. So we put a lot of things in place because we've listened. So we've listened a lot. So I think really the third thing is the response and the availability of the team. So while we have an amazing platform, and that's kind of the default interface for a lot of the interactions, we're still available by phone, and we still have a very personal relationship with our customers.
Can you mention a story with a customer where things went not far away from a disaster and they mentioned that working with you was actually your blessing and they felt good about your support and all the operational side of your things?
Yeah, I think I can't name names obviously, but we have seen some pretty crazy things happen. One of the difficult things is when we look at the data, for exceptions, as we call them. It's a nice word for big problems. When we look at the data for exceptions, you have the little exceptions like, oh, this is a day late or 2 days later, this or that, and we have our margins set the right way and we communicate appropriately. We do all that stuff. Then there's the kind of like the midpoint exception where this is gonna involve some cost, in terms of demurrage or detention or something like that, and we communicate those things. And then there's those there are those exceptions that are, someone sends a container to Korea by accident or something like that, where just something's going in the wrong direction and no one kind of knows it, and those are the cases where rubber hits road and where our knowledge of our customers and of their priorities and their businesses really comes into focus, because it allows us to make decisions, with them very quickly around things. And so the way that we characterize ourselves is a little bit less as a, just a freight forwarder, but we really more as a company that works to help our customers grow their businesses, because that's what we're doing. And because we understand that side of what it is they're doing, that helps us to, work with them to make quick decisions in the face of, unforeseen issues.
You just mentioned it can possibly happen that things go completely wrong. The container was supposed to go to Europe. It didn't, for whatever reason. Let's go down to the root of this problem. How can things like that happen? Who made the mistake here?
I defer that a little bit because I don't have I'm, my expertise is a little bit more on the technical side than it is on, on those sides. But in any big system where there are, hundreds to thousands of transactions and people involved in pieces of paper and loading and things like that, it is extremely rare that something like that happens in this world. It's number one. It's incredibly impressive, actually, to me, as someone new coming into the shipping industry a few years ago, to see how infrequently that actually occurs. But when it does, it does, and there can be a lot of different reasons. Some of them data entry. In fact, that's one I've seen probably the most is by hand data entry, and that's actually influenced a lot of what we've done in our own platform, in terms of some of the things we're working on right now, like automatic recognition, but then also in terms of the interfaces that we've built and the way that we double check things and verify things and validate things, really to make certain that we minimize the chance of any kind of an error coming through that could an effect on customers or have an effect on their shipments. And we've seen a definite reticence of people to type things in by hand from long lists and those sorts of things. So anytime there's a lot of options through our platform to import bulk lists directly from CSV files and really automate things that way. The benefit of that is, of course, automation and speed, but even more so, it's the accuracy side. Again, back to that accuracy being a priority for us, and that stood us in good stead, I think, in terms of removing the likelihood of the small issues that get big later on.
You just mentioned something about the direction your platform is developing and how you guys are going to improve your service and your technology. So, for someone who maybe has worked with you for a while, what could they expect in the future?
That's a good question. I think, so there's a few threads. One of those is, continued accuracy, and even increased accuracy. We developed Foresee, which is our prediction system, years ago, actually, I think about
Mhm.
3 years ago, 3 to 4 years ago, before the whole Gen AI craze hit and stuff like that. We were doing, container prediction delivery predictions within 48 hours, years before that occurred, which is kind of funny. But they can expect even further refinements in terms of that, and predictions as well improved across the other milestones and those sorts of things, because with the technology evolving just in general, it makes it easier and easier for us to get our math around the factors and the signals that sort of influence those things. So I think that's a big part. um, I think they can also expect to see further automation. We're working on different kinds of information recognition, different kinds of automation at a lot of different levels, and very often it's not the obvious things that matter the most. There's a lot of processes in shipping, like, quoting and invoicing and some of the mechanical things you think, oh, this it's not a big deal. Well, quoting is a big deal when you're approving, you know, 17 quotes a day. That becomes a major part of your workload. And if you're, in the shipping department at a mid-sized company, that's the kind of approval becomes a real thing, right? It's true. This is really a supply and demand business. So improving things like that and automating those interfaces and understanding that and making that faster for them is a big quality lift. It's a life quality lift. And it's so, probably more than any other industry I've worked in myself, this is a place where the really looking at what helps people is critical. It's not the fancy, shiny new features almost ever. It's really about the small things that you can automate and make faster and make more reliable and make more accurate, help them both in terms of their daily workflow, but then also help them sleep. So they're not going, oh man, is there any chance that I sent that container to Cambodia by accident? And it's no, because this was done, and we asked the right questions, we did the right thing. So a lot of the quality, I think, of what we do is manifest at that level.
Okay. Now, you mentioned all these things that are going to come up in the future. Is there things that are going quite well today already and things you wish to be improved?
In terms of what we do, or in terms of the industry as a
Techno-
whole, or yeah,
Let's talk about the technology as first.
yeah. So I'd say that the majority, technology is, I don't want to say it's easy to create, because I have the ultimate respect for our developer team and for the other developer teams, engineering teams that are out there. But technology is only as good. Technology that modifies data is only as good as the data it's being fed. So for me, the first thing that could be improved is the data that's coming in. As an industry, it's one of the greatest lacks, I think, in terms of making life better for people who work in it, is really getting good quality data that can be used to predict and track and those sorts of things. And we've all the different companies in this industry have created different ways of approaching the problem, and some are better, some are worse, and whatever else. But I think my big answer from a technology perspective would be the deficiencies today are much less on the technology side, much more in the data availability and data side. And there's some great companies that are addressing that, because the technology and the data are, ever more tightly bound. And the art, a lot of the art of what we do is around understanding what of that data to expose when, to whom, for what reason, right? We like to say that, as kind of referred to in the beginning, there's the main things that people pay attention to. There's maybe 20 major things that the most of our customers pay attention to most of the time. What's different is the order of those 20 things in terms of priority is wildly different for everyone. And you can have two parallel companies in the same city that do the same kind of importing from the same factories, who will want completely different approaches in terms of the way that they manage their shipping. And the shipping is a variable cost that sits, somewhere in the operations level. And the way that that's handled is as much a function of company culture and structure as it is technology dependency. So it's kind of a challenge as a software vendor to say, hey, we're going to build this and then everybody's going to use it. That's really very much, as you're saying, kind of not the case. But I think if there's the improvements that can be made, I think at one level is definitely the data that's coming, from the various sources, and improving resolution of data, in terms of other other areas. I mean, there's an increasing amount of data that's coming from government sources and other areas, which we use actively, which is also helpful to us to understand, the various dimensions of supply and demand, and progress and things like that that are made. But every single port is different. If you look at even at sort of at the port structures, right? A lot of the ports that are out there now have their own platforms or their own APIs or things like this, but there are very few standards that I've seen anyway that handle those things. So I think there's still a lot of opportunities in an industry level for standardized APIs. There's some actually interesting APIs being proposed by carriers like O&E now, that I know they're working to get other folks to sort of adhere to. But regardless of how you get there, the critical thing for us as a software vendor and as a platform and as a customer-facing organization is really the data quality. So I think that would be the thing that I'd raise up as the top priority.
This is interesting topic, and we discussed this on an earlier episode that the data availability is there, the infrastructure is there, but no one wants to share their data. What do you think is or could be the solution for this problem?
I think there isn't one solution that I can say off the cuff, but there's probably a different solution at a couple of different levels. Um, it there's a great deal of power, obviously, in the carriers in the industry, and here I'm thinking mostly oceanic, because air. We also do air freight as well. It's a different industry and a different set of rules and a different timing and a different set of dependencies. But just kind of generalizing about FCL style shipping on carriers, the different levels have sort of have different needs, and the I think you have to look through the lens of where creating efficiencies actually helps people's business model. There's a lot of industries in which, the several industries I've worked in previously where, the song of the industry is very much, oh, it's all about standardization and everything else. And then you realize after a while, you kind of go, wow, this just isn't standardizing. I wonder why not. And then you realize that when you look at people's business models, it's not in anybody's interest at the vendor level to actually standardize anything because they're living on their proprietary standards. And that's how they do their business, is by getting people in. And that's their part. It's a component of their differentiation. I don't think it's quite the same thing here, but I think it's also challenging to look at the different levels of the industry and say, hey, here's the point, the point around which we're going to gather all of the carriers or all the freight forwarders or all the consolidators or all the packers or whatever else, right? So there may be people who have genius ideas on how to solve this, and I don't, because I don't have enough experience, specifically in this industry. But I do think that that's a challenge, and this is, as you said earlier in one of our first conversations, Constantin, it's a very complex industry, and it's also a very old industry. Like, there's a lot of established, reliable methods, and I think to change a method for a lot of folks requires proof that the new method is better, and that proof has to be really concrete, and they really have to become convinced of it, because from a financial perspective, shipping is in some way a variable cost. I think that's how CFOs often regard the shipping department as kind of this variable cost area that stays within these two lines, and then everything's kind of okay, and here's the stretch. But that's something that making change is done incrementally. It's done gradually, and in a lot of cases, for a lot of companies, a couple of % a year improvement is really good, because then they're minimizing the risks.
What do you think? Which level of optimization do we have reached on this level? Of course, we cannot address all the companies within this statistic, I guess, but from an average speaking, what do you think? Where are we at right now, and what can we expect in the future?
I think we're on the cusp of some interesting opportunities in terms of what AI can bring, of course, to this area. We've implemented several of the first, several of the first steps towards that, which are user value add in terms of tracking and visual visibility and decision enabling decision making, really, which is the number one thing that everybody was really looking for a couple of years ago. And we have a lot of other AI enabled things, which I'm not at liberty to talk about, which are kind of going on going on right now. But I think there's a rising set of opportunities for automation, and I think we're still years and years away from drag and drop your containers on a screen, and then, in UPS or FedEx or DHL style, your containers simply show up. We are not there yet. It's going to be, I would guess, deep into double-digit years before something like that occurs. But there's certain elements of that that might be able to be automated, and handled and everything, kind of as you go. And I think we, along with many of the other software vendors in the industry, are looking actively through the lens of our customer to see what are the places where we can deploy, artificial intelligence and automation and all the corollary things in order to do that. An important point there, though, is that, if you look at the general stats of it, as much as I think AI is amazing and there's incredible opportunities there, and as a product person, it saves me, you know, probably a week, a month in terms of structuring and organization. It's just a magnificent technology, but at the same time, it's not a panacea. And a lot of enterprise proofs of concept, as you know, right now, are failing spectacularly because it's just there's so many considerations. And agentic AI is an awesome idea, but no one really wants to let that thing go wild on all their files, right? So it's a progressive what I just said probably raised the blood pressure of a bunch of folks who work in IT, who are watching this. But I think it's a progressive implementation, and over time, the greatest value for AI really is, this is my opinion, is in a vertical use case sense. We can use it to do this thing to solve this problem at this time for these folks, and if you can get that into place, then you can start to stitch those together. Once you have metrics on one, and you know that, hey, this really works. We've got this to be robust now. Here's our MVP. Okay, our first iteration of this, great. Now let's move to another problem we're going to solve using this, just like we did with prediction. And you start to stitch those together, you start to get sequences that actually make some sense, and that you can kind of grow up. But it has to be bottom up. It can't, especially in this industry, it can't be top down. It is an architectural question as much as it is a process question, because you have to know which data goes where.
That is a really good point you made there. The statistic says about over 90% of startups fail because they could not identify the proper use case for the problem they initially start to solve. It's just not made properly, I guess, or not marketed properly. What do you think?
Well, it's not about the marketing, that I can tell you. It has everything to do with product market fit and solving a clearly definable problem for customers, within a period of time and within a market window that you also have a handle on. I think one of the things that has been at the heart of Shippabo's success has been the fact that, Nina came into this market with Sam, uh, uh, who is literally a rocket scientist, came into this market with a real problem, which is that she just couldn't get the stuff done in one of her other businesses. She said, I need something that solves this problem. Like, can we go solve this problem? And I wasn't privy to the conversation, but I imagine Sam said, sure, there's ways we could start to solve this. And then eventually this became something that other folks wanted to use, and they realized there was a whole market for this. And so Shippabo kind of grew from there. And we haven't lost our freight forwarding roots, at that point. But the critical thing for us, I think, has been that we're solving a tangible problem. The first problem we solved was, hey, nobody's talking to anybody, and there's a million phone calls in all directions, and spreadsheets don't work for this anymore. So we solved that with messaging, with a partner module in the platform, with some basic visibility tools. From there, extended into, wow, it takes forever to get a quote to somebody, to get the order made. So we built a whole new order system and then kind of grew that forward. As we said, quoting and ordering is a major part of that. So we kind of work progressively from there. But back to your point about startups, I think that's the root of being successful. In the startups that I've been lucky enough to be involved in, that has been the root of all of them from a success perspective, starting with a real problem that you go and solve, and you get customers to give you money for solving that problem. And then you start to look outside of competition. You kind of go from there, and you understand what your value is and your differentiation. You kind of grow. It only has something to do with marketing until much later. Now, there are wild exceptions to that. If you're, a B2C hat brand that's selling on Instagram, I realize it's a totally different thing. Here, I'm speaking really about B2B. But I think those principles pretty much hold. It's gotten, that market for startups has gotten you know, the time frame has gotten shorter and shorter. Things have gotten more expensive. It's gotten more difficult in some measures than it used to be, I'd imagine. But the principle of that of problem solving remains the same. And I think in products like our platform that continue to have success in the market are ones where the part of the product team discipline is looking at every single thing you're going to do and say, what is the problem we're solving? How much is that worth to customers? How much is it worth to us to solve that? How much is it going to cost to do? And how do we then finally, how do we put this out there? How do we market it? How do we differentiate ourselves? So that's kind of how we work.
I like that success story. So real, such a great use case, such a great implementation as well. And to recap all of that, it is about finding a specific problem, looking for the solution, identifying who it's for, and from there to grow.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That's how I see it.
Now, Daniel, as I know you're a busy man, for anyone that felt appealed by what you said here and who might want to have a look at your platform or at your services, where can they find you?
Yeah, so please come visit us on shippabo.com, shippabo.com. There you'll find a wealth of information. You'll find our knowledge center about Shippabo, about shipping in general. There's a lot of tutorials and stuff in there that are great, but also information about how we work with we provide global shipping, and with our logistics team, how we provide digital customs clearance and services and things, and also tracking and platforms and things like that to support the entire workflow. So shippabo.com is a great starting point.
Okay. Thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing the insights.
Awesome.
And
Thank you so much for the opportunity. It's been a pleasure.
Likewise.
Terrific.
Have a good day.
Have a great day.
Bye.
Thanks. You too. Bye now.